For the first time? For the first time? There we go. Okay. For the first time in 3 months, I can breathe. Yeah. So yes, I am getting oxygen to my head now. And as someone suggested this morning, now maybe my hair will grow. I don't know. We will see. One can only hope. So there's this bird that's flying south for the winter. Flew right into this ice storm. And so freezing rain and ice is pelting this bird and freezing to its wings, this body, and the bird, it's going down. It can't stay aloft. It's going down. Lands in the middle of this field. Continues to be pelted by ice and snow and freezing rain and all that, and thinks, this is it. This is the end. I'm going to die like this. I never thought I would go like this. But then all of a sudden, a cow comes and stands over that bird and makes the only way to put this, a deposit right on top of that bird. Manure from heaven. And now the bird goes, oh no. Not only am I going to freeze to death, I'm going to stink while I'm doing it. But then all of a sudden, the bird realizes the warmth from the manure is starting to melt all that ice and snow that's around his body. And thinks, I'm going to live. I'm going to live through this. And begins to chirp, 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 chirp. I'm going to live, going to live. And then one of Satan's leading creatures, a cat, hears that bird chirping and goes and digs that bird out of the manure and eats it. 3 morals to the story. Number 1, not everybody that puts manure on you is your enemy. Number 2, not everybody who digs you out of manure is your friend. And number 3, when you're in manure, it's probably best just to keep your mouth shut. Now, we have been in this series for the past several weeks talking about your faith during difficult and dark times. And we're going to wrap this series up today. And what we're going to be doing is looking at a section of Scripture that Paul writes in Romans chapter 8. And so as he's dealing with our faith during difficult times, the question that he asks us, he doesn't directly ask it, but it's assumed all in the text, is this: where's your hope? Where's your hope? Because what your hope is in determines what you're living for. If your hope is in money, if your hope is in marriage, if your hope is in your kids, if your hope is in your health, if your hope is in something that is temporary, or if your hope is in something that can be stripped away from you, when you go through difficult times, it's not going to go well for you. But if your hope is in Christ, your identity in Christ, and what He has waiting for you, then whenever you go through difficult times, not only will you be able to endure that, you will actually grow stronger in the midst of those things. Okay, now that's a summation. If you black out rest of the service, you take a nap, whatever you do, rest of the service, then if you get that, you got the summation for it. Now let's get there together, okay? So Romans chapter 8, verse 18, for I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is going to be revealed in us. The sufferings of this present time. That's rather generic, isn't it? Not much emotion attached to that. But you can think of some sufferings that you're going through that might help you attach some emotion to that. Maybe you're going through some physical sufferings or some relational sufferings, or maybe you're sitting next to your present suffering, or maybe your suffering is job difficulties, or maybe it's depression. When those things happen, they reveal what your hope is in. Whenever you go through any type of tragedy in your life, any type of difficulty, it's like when Jesus talks about at the end of Matthew chapter 7, the storms in life reveal your foundation, whether it's on the sand or the rock. And it's the same way. Whenever difficulties come into your life, they reveal, what do you have your hope in? What's the foundation of your life? Viktor Frankl, he was a Jewish Austrian psychoanalyst. He was imprisoned in Auschwitz in World War II. And he said, here I am among all these people here in this prison camp. And that's what I do for my life, is study people. What a great opportunity I have. And so he studied the people in the camp and their reactions to being in prison and things like that. He wrote about it in a book he wrote when he got out of Auschwitz, A Man's Search for Meaning. But he says people responded to being in a prison camp, especially one like Auschwitz, in different ways. Some people just got angry. They became mean-spirited, even to the fellow inmates that were in that prison with them. Maybe you know people like that have gone through some tragedy, gone through some hurt, and they just became mean, angry people. Then he said some people, it seems like they were getting along okay, but then all of a sudden, one morning, they refused to get out of bed, or they refused to get up and get dressed, or refused to go stand in line outside, and no amount of entreaties, no amount of beatings could change their mind. They had just given up all hope. And so they would just lay there and get beaten to death, or just because they'd just given it completely up. Some people, he said, put their hope into what was going to come in their minds when they got out of Auschwitz, that they survived that. Their idea was all my possessions, all the things I own, my family, all that's going to be restored to me. But the people who survived Auschwitz, there was this unreal amount of depression and suicide by the ones who survived it. Why? Because they had their hope in the wrong thing. That didn't happen. They didn't get all their possessions back, their home back, all their stuff back, and their family back. It was just gone. And what he says is that the people who survived Auschwitz was the one who had a hope beyond this world, the ones who had a hope in something that death and destruction could not touch. Because he talks about, you've been in a prison camp like that, it reveals the very foundations of your soul. What do you have your hope in? What is that you are trusting in? But if you have your hope in the wrong thing, it's not going to be good. So going back to verse 18, for I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed in us. Not worth comparing to what's coming. One day, you're going to experience heaven, he's saying, and it's not worth comparing with life going through now, even with all its difficulties. It's not worth comparing. Now, Lee Strobel helps out with this in the book that he wrote. He talks about this, and I'll sort of use his illustration. Suppose January 1st, 2026, there's this guy, and his mouth's been hurting him. He's been having these tooth problems, and it's been really happening, but it gets really bad. I mean, he can't stand it anymore, and he has an emergency root canal done on January 1st, 2026. Halfway through the procedure, the anesthesia wears off. And now, boy, he's hurting. You know, he leaves that place, and he's just gripping his mouth. He's just in pain, and he's driving home, and on his way home, he gets in a wreck. Totals his car out. The car he hits is his wife's car. It could happen, and it happened. And he gets home, and on his front door is tacked a foreclosure notice. And as he's reading through the foreclosure notice, he gets a text from his boss that says, don't bother showing up for work tomorrow. Your job's been eliminated. Tell me, January 1st, 2026, the worst day ever. But on January 2nd, things begin to turn around. He gets an email that his rich uncle has died and left him $43 million. He goes out and buys the car of his dreams, the house of his dreams, and it just so happens that the house he bought, his next door neighbor is Michael Jordan, who's always coming over and say, hey, why don't you come over to my house? Let's shoot some hoops together. And then he buys a startup company. And on accident, they discover the cure for cancer. And now this Tahitian island comes up for sale. He buys this Tahitian island. Things are going great. At the end of the year, December 31st, he gets a call from a friend of his and says, how's it going? How are you doing? He says, man, it's going great. You want to come over to my house? We'll shoot some hoops with MJ? Do you want to come to my own private island? And he goes, well, I just remember hearing something about a root canal and losing your job. He says, oh, yeah, that happened. But what's been going on since then? I don't even already remember that anymore. And there's going to come a time when you've been in heaven for 318,796,286 days, and somebody's going to come up to you, and they're going to ask this dumb question, because people always ask dumb questions. How's your existence here going so far? And you're going to say, great. Man, here I am in the presence of God. Anytime I just discover more and more about His glory and who He is. Couldn't be better. But I remember that 70 years on earth being kind of tough for you. It's difficult. Yes, it was. But all those years, from what I'm experiencing now, everything, all that hurt and pain I went through in those 70 years here on earth is not even worth comparing to what I went through. Now, I have to admit, I do get a little bit frustrated whenever someone we know who's a Christian dies and we act like it's the worst thing ever. That's idolatry. That's worshiping this life. Our hope is not supposed to be in this life. Our hope is in something that's yet to come. We do this. We think, man, I'm broken now. I'll be broken for all eternity. I'm hurt now. I will always be hurt. And we begin to think that eternity, or look at eternity in light of what's happening now in us on this life. When rather we should be thinking about what's coming for eternity and let that influence how we think about what's happening here. That when we get to eternity, it's not worth comparing all the hurt that we're just going through here, the pain we're going through here, it's not worth comparing to that. Not even worth being in the same sentence. Quit underestimating what it's going to be like to be in heaven. The greatest thing that can happen. So Paul is saying all this stuff we're going through now, it's not even worth comparing to what's coming. And then he says this in verse 19. For the creation eagerly waits, anticipation for God's sons to be revealed. Eagerly waits. Has this idea of being breathless with anticipation. Now, he uses that same phrase, eagerly waits, not only here in verse 19, but in verse 23 and 25. And there it's referring to us eagerly waiting, not for creation like it's referring to here, not the creation's eagerly waiting, but us eagerly waiting for what's coming. Looking forward to it. All right. Remember when my kids were in school and every once in a while you would hear that word, I've got a science project. The worst things you can hear is I got a science project that's due tomorrow. And you're just now thinking about this? Now we got to rush the store and buy all these things and all this stuff to get your science project so you can get your science project out there. One science project that person did it on was how does weather affect a person's mood? I think a better project would be how does science projects affect a parent's mood? But think about that, how does weather affect our mood? Now, lived in Iowa for several years, and there, what would happen in the wintertime? For a couple of weeks in the wintertime, it would be gray and cloudy every day. No ray of sunshine at all, just gray and cloudy every day for about a 2-week period. Then it'd clear up. And when it cleared up, changed everybody's mood. I also noticed living in Alaska how weather affected people's moods. In the wintertime, as things are, dark and a little bit dreary, I mean, the sun, it would come up, but it comes on the horizon and just goes down, like that. Now, in the summertime, it comes up and just sort of circles around you, just dips down a little bit and just stays around you on top. But in the wintertime, you just get a little bit of sun and it goes back down and things are cold and dreary. But you know what is different? People who are planning a trip to Hawaii. Alaska's number one tourist destination is Hawaii. Hawaii's number one destination to Alaska, by the way. But people who had Hawaii on their calendar, they looked at weather completely differently. They're sitting there and you watch it, it's miserable, and they're looking happy. They're packing their sandals and packing their shorts and all that stuff. And people would actually look at weather differently. So how they process the cold was a lot different. It could be getting terribly miserable right before they're about to leave for Hawaii, but no, they're still happy. Because why? They process cold differently. Why? Because they had Hawaii on their calendar. What I'm trying to get you to understand is that when you have heaven on your calendar, you should process the stuff you're going through here differently. And even when it gets terrible, even when it gets worse, you're just all of a sudden even more excited because you've got heaven on your calendar. That's what the idea that Paul is trying to get around here, that what's coming is not worth even, the stuff we're experiencing right now is not worth even comparing to what's coming. And so he says this, back to verse 19. For creation eagerly waits the anticipation of God's sons to be revealed. What does he mean by revealed? Well, he's going to explain that to us. This is what he means. For, and he's about to go through this explanation of what it means to when we're going to be revealed. And he gives us this if you want to call it a system to look at. He gives us something to help us put it together. He walks us through this explanation of what it means to be revealed. And he does here, he starts at the beginning. Because he says, and here's his explanation, for the creation was subject to fertility, to sin, to chaos, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it. So he's saying, here's what it looks like in the beginning. We are subjected to futility, to sin, to chaos. Who subjected it? God did. So what that means is there's going to always be another earthquake. There's going to always be another hurricane. Always another type of disease in the world. The reason your world's broken is because you were born broken in a broken world. It's not just you. The whole world's broken. We all are broken. You were born judged in a judged world. Maybe you've heard people say from time to time, better not do that. God will get you. Well, I got news. You're already gotten. You were born gotten. And if God does nothing else to you because of any sin in your life, you don't get by with anything because one day you're going to die. And what he's getting across here is that, look, you cannot earn your way past pain and suffering. You're going to get some of that in this world because this whole world is broken. It's going to come. You can't get by without that. And let's go back to next verse and just get this little phrase out of this next verse. That creation itself will also be set free from the bondage to decay. So we have this futility. He says it's sin and chaos, but this bondage to decay. The way my father put that is that you got to be tough to get old. Getting old is not for wimps. You're going to hurt. And it's true, when I was younger, if I hurt myself, I knew why I hurt. I got up this morning and I was taking my shower. I lifted my leg up and my hamstring was hurting. I don't know what I did for that. This morning, some guys us are praying in the office and Tom was there and said, Tom, do you hurt? He says, I always hurt. This is the age where you start taking proactive Advil. You know something's going to hurt during the day, so you go ahead and take it. Why? Bondage to decay. What did I do to cause that? I was just born. It's the reason you don't have to plant weeds in your flower garden. Bondage to decay. So there's the past. The past, bondage to decay. Futility, sin, and chaos. Now he's going to take us to the future. Okay? Let's go back to the very last words of 20 because they're not sure where to put these words at. Sometimes it's verse 20, 21. Who subjected in the hope. So we got hope here, in the hope that the creation itself will also be set free from the bondage to decay into the glorious freedom of God's children. That creation itself will also be. We're talking about the future, in the hope, what's coming in the future. So what he's saying here is that the destiny of the universe is tied to the destiny of man. When we're all what we're intended to be, then creation will be all what it's intended to be. That just as Our glory is tied to Christ's glory. Creation's glorious change is tied to ours. Tied to ours. I'm having trouble speaking this morning. It's that oxygen is flowing through and going much quicker. And then the next verse. Okay. My bad. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together with labor pains until now. So Paul's saying, it's like we're in labor pains. I don't know what Paul knows about being in labor, but he writes about it. That if you could see it, if you could see what's coming, if you could see the future, it's like now we're in these labor pains. I remember when my first son was born, there was some tears and there was some crying out for medication and things. Lisa had a problem too, but anyway. But when we went through that, after a couple of days, I might do this again, she says. Why? Because labor pains are leading to something joyful, something good. And so you're willing to go through that, or as you go through that, you're going, hey, this is not so bad. I have a hope of what's coming. I know what this produces. And we've all heard the analogy of the two painful things in the world that we experience. One is giving birth, and the other is passing a kidney stone. And those two things are vastly different, right? Somebody gives birth, they go, I might do this again. Nobody passes a kidney stone and goes, may God bless us with another. Why? Because the outcome. Because what it's leading to. What it's coming to. So we process the pain differently depending on what's on the other side of the pain. In other words, what he's saying here is that if your hope is in heaven, then going through the suffering here is going to be like giving birth. Something better is coming. But if you don't have any hope in heaven, then all the suffering that you're going through here is sort of like passing a kidney stone. There's no good into it at all. It just hurts. It just stays hurting. Hard to deal with. Messes you over in your life. So he's not trying to diminish the pain that we're going through when we go through pain here on earth. What he's trying to do is to help us understand the greatness of what's coming. When we get to heaven, maybe all your questions will be answered. Maybe you'll know why everything is happening. Or maybe when you get to heaven, you're in his presence. You don't even care about those questions anymore. It doesn't matter because you're just with him. All I know is that at the resurrection of Jesus, it's set into motion. Something that's coming and it can't be stopped. It can't be stopped. Here's what we read about in 2 Corinthians. Therefore, we do not give up. Even though our outer person is being destroyed, our inner person is being renewed day by day. For our momentary light affliction. Doesn't seem that way, does it, sometimes? Our momentary light affliction is producing for us an absolutely incomparable eternal weight of glory. It doesn't seem that way. Why? Because we're just compared to what we have now. We're not comparing it to what's coming. He says this, when you get to what's coming, you're going to look back here and go, oh, that's just momentary in light. But again, we tend to be judging eternity by what we're experiencing now rather than judging what we're experiencing now in light of eternity. Whole different way to look at things. So we do not focus on what is seen, but on what is unseen. The future, spiritual. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. That's why we don't give up. So, what he's given us the past. And he's given us the future. Now he's going to give us the meantime. What's happening here? Verse 23. Not only that, but we ourselves who have the Spirit as the first fruits, we also groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for our adoption, the redemption of our bodies. So what's going on now? In the midst of this eagerly waiting, what we're doing, we have this groaning within us. Back when I lived in Iowa, our church was right there at the edge of campus of Iowa State University. So, everything was about that. Our church was full of people from the university students. We had a full-time just student minister to the university. We everybody had doctorates and PhDs, and I think we had 2 couples over 55 years old. It was just a completely different type of setting, but everything had to do with the university. And so that meant game days were something. Now, back in that time, Iowa State had a good basketball team. They've always had a pretty decent basketball team. But back then, their football team was bottom-dwelling football team. For the past 7, 8 years, they've had a lot better football team, but not so back then. It was pretty bad. So that year, the year I went to this football game, we were playing Nebraska. And back then, Nebraska mattered. They were ranked in the top 10. I can't remember what they were. I know they were in the top 10. So everybody knew that when they came to town, they were coming to play at our stadium, they were going to crush us. Now, in the bookstore, they put banners up every week for who we're playing when it's football season. It might say, "Kill Kansas" or "Maul Missouri" or something like that. But you know what it said that week? "Maintain dignity against Nebraska." Everybody knew we were getting crushed. And it was cold, but I didn't go to too many games, but I remember that game. I remember now, that's the game I was at, was Nebraska, because I remember being and so the idea is that we have is sometimes when we're going through difficulties, sometimes we just try and fake the ache. Sometimes we just try and make the best of it, of what we're going through. Sometimes we pretend it's not there. But he tells us in this meantime, we groan. But now he's fixing to tell us how we groan. And he's going to tell us we groan with a hope. Look at the next 2 verses. Now in this hope, so he's talking about, yes, we're growing with this hope. Now in this hope we were saved, but hope that is seen is not hope, because who hopes for what he sees? Now if we hope for what we do not see, we eagerly wait for it with patience. 5 times he talks about hope in this verse. So we groan with a hope. Hope's a powerful thing. One cardiologist said, hope can cure anything. But you take away hope from a person, you just put a nail in their coffin. They did this study of 6,000 Korean POWs. And they said 1/3 of them died because they just gave up, saw no hope. And they just died because of that. So everything matters. Not that we have difficulties. We're going to have difficulties. It comes with living in a fallen world. We're all going to have suffering and pain in this world. But how you look at it is completely different. It changes everything. See, I know that people who have no context for their pain and suffering, they had no idea of the past, of why we even are in the state that we're in. They had no idea what's coming in the future, and they had no idea of what even to do, how that determines how they face life now. And when you had no context for the pain and suffering you go through, it's ugly. It may wind up and you just giving up. It may wind up and you becoming a mean person, a cruel person. It may wind up of one day committing suicide and going through depression because what you had always hoped would happen never happened. But when there's people who you see go through their suffering and their pain with a hope, it leaves me going, I want some of that. That's what I want for my life. To have a hope like that. So, what it should do in the midst of going through pain and suffering is drive us to God. Remember what I said earlier, summating all this up, was that, don't laugh at me. Okay, I'll slow down. I can breathe now. I don't want to say it all in one breath. Where's Becky at? She in here somewhere? I don't know. All right. It's life-changing. When you go through pain and suffering that we're all going to go through, and you do it with your focus on what's coming. Here's what we read in 2 Corinthians 1, verse 8. We do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, of our affliction that took place in Asia. We were completely overwhelmed, beyond our strength, so that we even despaired of life itself. We're going to die. We can't survive this. Indeed, we felt that we had received the sentence of death. So that, there's a purpose behind this. So that we would not trust in ourselves, but in God who raises the dead. We're not afraid to die. Our God raises the dead. What did it do? It pushed them to God. Their confidence, it wasn't on themselves and what they could do to get themselves through it. It was all based on God, that they're trusting God. Let's read this verse here in John 16:33. Here's a good commentary on this part of Romans chapter 8. I love it when the Bible's a good commentary on itself. So here's a good commentary. John 16:33. I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. You will have suffering in this world. Be courageous. I've conquered the world. So you are going to have suffering. But he says, be courageous. Any of you know about suffering? Now, he's not talking about I lost my car keys suffering here, okay? He's talking about my heart's breaking. I'm not sure I can go on. That heartbreaking, that just mess with your soul type of suffering. So there's two things that are true in this passage. Well, first of all, let's go like this. He says, in this world. So he's comparing this world and the world to come. Okay, so in this world, this is what's going to happen. So he's assuming, yes, there's a world to come. So in this world, you're going to have suffering. Two things are true. You're going to have that suffering. You're going to go through that heartbreaking, that soul-crushing suffering. The other thing is true is that he's overcome the world. He's bigger than your suffering. Now, I wish that only one of those things were true, but both things are true. You're going to have suffering, but what? He's conquered the world. He's overcome the world. There's nothing bigger than him. Your suffering is not bigger than he is. So you can do what? You can be courageous in the midst of it. Be courageous. See, nobody's going to be limping through heaven going, man, not 70 years on earth, 80 years on earth, whatever it was so hard for me. It's going to it messes up my whole eternity for me. No, it's not going to happen that way. It's not the way it works. We will experience a transformation when he comes again that's going to be unbelievable. So again, tell me this is not true. We go through hurt now. We think, oh, it's that way forever. We go through pain now. Oh, it's going to be that way forever. And we let what's going in our life, going through our life right now, what we're experiencing now, distort our vision of eternity. Messes up our vision of eternity. Makes it completely out of place. But what Paul is doing is says, you need to get a view of what's coming. And you need to let what you know about what's coming determine how you think about your life right here and now. And when you do that, you will know that all that pain, that hurt, not even worth comparing to what's coming. In other words, what I said to you earlier is quit underestimating what heaven will be like. Be courageous in the midst of what you're going through. So, the worst thing that can happen to you in this world is not have some pain and suffering. The worst thing that can happen is that you leave this world without a relationship with God. That's the worst thing that can happen. So, this week, many of you are familiar with death of Charlie Kirk. Now, I didn't really know that much about it. I never listened to a podcast or a speech he gave or anything. So a lot of this is, I'll admit, there's a lot of ignorance that's there. But from what the blips that I saw on some news and other people say that he kept a sharp focus on the gospel. And I know that his his death has affected, a lot of people in this world, a lot of prayer visuals going on, a lot of, let's keep the movement alive type thing is going on and that type of thing. And so I'm telling you to say that I have no idea as far as what something like this tragedy of his, I don't want to mischaracterize his life because I don't know enough about to characterize his life. But, man, I'm open to the possibility that anything that can cause revival can be a good thing. And what I'm hoping people will do from the blips I've heard is that they will go back and maybe go, I heard him say this, and now he's dead. I need to think again about what I heard him say, and that points him to the gospel. I don't know. But people now seem to be seeing things in a completely different light about him and his life. And we need so much to have a switch go off in us that we start seeing things in a different light. Now, what I guess I say what I am, I don't know, is what I fear, but what I'd hate to see happen is a bunch of people saying, maybe God will do something now in our country. Maybe that'll lead to revival in that. I'm thinking, no, that's not quite the right focus. The focus should be maybe God will do something in my life. Maybe my life can be turned around now. Maybe God will do something in my church, in my community. Because as long as we think revival has to do with people out there, we're missing the point. We're missing the point. It's not about people out there. It's about us. Where's our hope at? Is our hope that we'll once again become a Christian nation, or is our hope that people will start to follow God for real and not be pretend all the time? Because there's a lot of people in our churches and in our culture that'll proclaim Christ, but it's not real. Man, they got this idol of self and they're giving their lives to everything else but Christ. And it looks good on the outside, but it's not real. So I just simply want to do this for an invitation today. To say, if you have a longing, a hunger for something real, for God to move, not out there, but in here. Maybe you just want to come and kneel and pray. Maybe you just want to say, God, do something in me, do something in my culture. But we got to have something real. How do you know what's real or not? Well, what we're just talking about today, when people go through pain and suffering, you find out what their hope is in, right? It reveals what their hope is in. And so now, this little tragedy is happening, it gets revealed what our hope is in. Is our hope in how we can see government change some laws and do some things different? Or is our hope in what God can do in the hearts of people and minds in this country and change their hearts? And when I say people, I'm mainly thinking about people in the churches, okay? So maybe this is a time where you just want to say, okay, God, I'm ready for you to do something in me, to change me. So that as back in light of our sermon, so when I'm going through pain and suffering, I don't go, oh, this is the worst thing ever, God, just get me out of this. But I actually not just endure it, but I go stronger because it pushes me to God. And I learn to trust in Him. And my hope is in what's coming, not in this world here, but in what's coming in the next world. Because I'm not underestimating what heaven is going to be like. That my worst thing here is not even worth comparing to what's coming. It's going to be so overwhelmed being with Him forever. Don't underestimate heaven. Don't underestimate what God can do if you decide to surrender your heart to Him. Don't miss that. Your whole world can change. What you're facing now, the way you're looking at everything in your life can change if you're ready now and just say, God, I'm giving it all to you. You have first place in everything. First place in it all. So we're going to have invitation. And if God is speaking to you, you may want to come and just kneel down here and pray and say, God, do a work in me. And you're ready for that to happen. You can do it. If you want to come and say, Pastor, I want to give my life to Christ. I want to be a Christ follower. You can come and I can help you walk through that. But this is an opportunity, and you get to decide which way you're going to go. So stand together.